So I'm always getting asked how I process my melodies, how I process my loops, sample packs, whatever it is, and especially on the new free loop kit that I just dropped, there'll be a link in the description to that. But a lot of people want to know how I process those loops and how I kind of go about getting that spacious, dark feeling to them. So that's what we're going to be covering in today's video. All right, so as mentioned, you can get this loop. There'll be a link in the description. I dropped a free loop kit with 10 loops in it, and today we're going to go over the processing that I like to do and kind of show you how I go about processing samples when it comes to the effects that I put on certain things, especially the strings that I have right here. I really like the effects. So I'm going to play the loop as is, then I'll take all the effects off to show you what it sounds like before, and then we'll break down each part, and I'll go over the effects that I used and the thought process behind it and how I wanted it to sound and how I got it to actually sound like that. So let's hear the whole loop. And now let's take everything off and hear it again. Watch, it's going to sound completely different. So as you can see, each one of these has its own processing to it. Let's go ahead and go over the guitar first. So I have the guitar soloed. I'm going to turn on all the effects and then I'm going to turn them off here so we can go one by one. So the guitar by itself sounds like this. And it's just picked acoustic and it sounds pretty good, but I wanted it to have a very spacious feel to it, a lot of delay, a lot of reverb, and just kind of be spread out a little bit more. So the first thing that I did to it actually was run it through tape saturation, and that's the Kramer tape, and you'll see what happens when I press play. So I'm just warming it up a little bit, but this sounded really good, so I just kept it here. So as mentioned, it is pushing into a little bit of tape saturation. I have the flux turned to about 179, and then I brought down the wow and flutter. So all that did was add a little bit of saturation to it, kind of warm it up, make it a little bit like more beefy, and add a little bit of upper harmonics. So then the next thing I did was went ahead and added an EQ. And for this, I just cut out a little bit of the low end. I didn't do too much to this. I wanted a lot of that low end to stay in the guitar for this sample. So as you can see, I'm doing like a low shelf around 80 Hertz. So with these two off, here's how it sounds. So that just kind of freed up a little bit of space. And then the main thing on this was actually the guitar rig. So if we open this up, you guys have seen me use guitar rig for a long time. And I feel like it's just one of those really good effects units. Besides all the amps and stuff, there's a bunch of different effects that you can use and really dial in like an all-in-one type of plugin. Pretty much I can bring this up and add in stereo imaging, tape echoes, just all different types of stuff. And inside of all of these, you can go in here and select different types of things. So let's say you're using a guitar, you can hit guitar, type of effect you want, the characteristics of it, different types of amps. So I just sorted by spacious, and then I went through here and ended up just finding a nice preset. So you can obviously see what's happening here. There's some delay, there's some reverb, there's some stereo imaging going on. So if I go ahead and turn that on, you're gonna hear the guitar change a lot. So I'm gonna press play. There's a really big reverb, some nice delay, and then some stereo imaging going on. It just kind of widens it out, pushes it back, creates like a really big room for it. And then you'll see that I have this brought down to about 40% because all the way up, it was just too much delay and too much reverb. Like it's just way too much. So I brought it down to about 40%, I think I had it at. And that gave us all the effects on the guitar. So again, if we hear it before and after. And I feel like that carries the sample a lot. It just gave it a lot of space and kind of gave me the idea that I want this to have a lot of reverb and a lot of delay. So the next thing we have is the strings. So I did copy the guitar rig over. You'll see that it's the same preset. So the same exact setup, I copied it over. It sounded good, so I left it. And then an EQ cutting out some lows and a little bit of highs. So let me show you what the strings sounded like before, because this is probably the craziest one, because before I turned anything on and I have them normal, this is what they sound like. So I have the guitar on, I'm gonna play the strings with no processing, and then on the start of the third bar, I'll turn it on. So you'll see that now the string has some space. It matches the guitar more. It doesn't stick out too much. So the next thing I have is a piano. And for this piano, it's just playing a few notes. I'll go ahead and play that without processing. And that's just keyscape. The strings was a stock string inside of Contact. So for the piano, all I did was a little bit of EQ. I cut out a lot of high end because I wanted it tucked back. I brought out a little bit of low end because I definitely wanted the guitar and piano to carry the most low end. So when I'm creating samples or loops, I don't like to take out all of the low end just in case when you guys go to use it, you still have it there if you want it, or you can take it out yourself. If I render it with nothing, there's not really much putting it back in there. And then I used S1 by waves to widen out the piano. So if we hear the piano before and after, here's before. And the reason I took out a lot of that high end was so that the piano wasn't overtaking on the sample. And what I mean by that is I wanted the guitars and strings to be like the high end of the sample. The piano was just supposed to carry that weight, right? That low end energy, and just kind of carry the bottom of the sample. And then you'll see what happens when I have the effects on and we play them all together. So if I take it off, you're going to see that the piano is a little bit more up front and kind of distracting. And then when I turned it off, it kind of softened it up and it pushed it to the back and really just let the low end and low mid range kind of do all of the work for the sample. The vocal definitely had to be pushed to the back and had to have some processing added to it because it's an arcade vocal, but without any processing, it stands out way too much. Let's go ahead and hear it. And now let's turn on the processing. So the first thing I did was cut out up to about 120 hertz. I didn't want any low end in it. I could have done like a low cut, but sometimes if I'm lazy, I'll end up just dragging down the first one, which turns it into a shelf. As you can see, I did that on the high end as well. The other ones were intentional. This one, I could have done a low cut and a high cut, but I ended up just grabbing it. When I'm moving quick, sometimes I just low shelf. So that was up to like 107. And then I did a high shelf and brought it down to about 4K, about 4,300. And then we have a little dip in the low mids at about 340, anywhere from like that 250 to 500 range. Sometimes I'll pull out so it can kind of, not be too muddy and not too upfront, but it really just depends on the vocal. And then I have a pretty big reverb on it. The 3-second decay time, pretty like normal medium, not too big of a size room. And then I have the wet brought up pretty high to about 86%. So it really just has a lot of reverb to it. So let's hear that again. So for the first 4 bars, we'll have it turned off. And then the second 4, I'll go ahead and bring it in. It's not up front, it's not distracting. It's more of just like an ambient sound in the back, but you can still hear that it's a vocal. So again, let's hear this whole sample with no processing at all and just hear how everything's kind of up front, nothing's in the back, there's no space, there's no reverbs, everything's just kind of in your face, and it doesn't sound too good. Especially that string. So obviously every sample or loop you're creating or melody is going to be different depending on how you're processing it. But for a lot of the ones inside this free pack that I dropped, I kind of went with that same feeling where it was kind of a dark, very open, spacious, lots of reverbs, lots of delay feel to it, and a few things up front. And that's just kind of like the vibe that I wanted to go for these specific loops. So this is a way that you can achieve it and a way that I achieved it in a lot of these. So hopefully some of these techniques can help you out depending on how you want to process your loops. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. If you did like this video, leave a thumbs up. You guys can follow me on all social medias at Lifestyle Did It. Make sure to hit my site, lifestyledidit.com, for everything else. Other than that, subscribe to your boy, push notifications. Thanks.